Subversion is a top-down stealth game where the player has a series of objectives that they must complete in order to fulfill that level's goal and move on. This could be as simple as escaping the level to as difficult as stealing objects within the level and escaping the area without being detected. Guards aren't the only threat, however, as players must also use their skills to avoid cameras, dogs, and being caught doing suspicious things in front of the other guests. The player must interact with their secret contact in order to discover the location of their goal object. The player must accomplish this within the level's time limit while avoiding suspicion from the guards or other guests. If suspicion levels begin to rise, the player can avoid detection by talking with guests in order to blend in, or use them to set up a distraction to take the suspicion away from him or her. At certain places, the player is also able to use certain objects to knock down guards, helping him or her avoid them altogether. The player can also use their Supervision ability to identify important guests, which is the contact that can give the player information about the location of the goal object, interactive objects, and any other objective that pertains to the goal. Once all primary objectives have been completed, the player must reach the exit of the level without maxing out their suspicion, but if all else fails, the player can try to outrun the guards as long as they have completed their objective.
Although the original Capstone pitch resembles what our game is currently, there are some changes and tweaks that were implemented along the way. In the pitch, the game's objective wasn't really defined. There was one primary objective required to complete the level, and any number of secondary objectives that were required for a perfect game. I think the part of this that felt awkward was that the primary objective was originally supposed to involve the same simple minigame every time, only with different levels. Gameplay was also featuring a 2D view mode that was only necessary when the player was caught by a guard, where the player could only escape custody if they had previously gossiped with a socialite.
In early development, we decided to remove the guard-player interaction and the socialite gossip in order to keep things in scope and expand on other things. One of the first things we did was split the puzzle minigame for safecracking into two different things, lockpicking and hacking, in order for more of the group to add their own spin on things. Lockpicking would be a simple quick-time event, and hacking would be a simple version of a Deus Ex-style hacking system.
We knew we wanted a top-down perspective for our game. Because of our placeholder assets, though, it became difficult to tell which way guards, socialites, and even the player were facing. We ended up using arrows to denote the characters' perspectives. In early development of the game, there was only one type of guard and one type of socialite. Based on playtesting and feedback, we wanted to expand upon these later to enhance not only other mechanics, but player choice. Objectives were also very non-linear early on. This would help with player choice and even allow players to complete secondary objectives that would later unlock more difficult levels and utilize older level layouts. At first, our idea was to have very large open levels and have lots of socialites and objectives. Through playtesting, we discovered that smaller levels ended up being more intuitive and less frustrating for the player. This led us to prototyping a variety of different level types, and we ended up taking a lot of inspiration from games like Hotline Miami and Monaco.
Now, as we began to dive further into our game development cycle, we began to notice a few things starting to change. Most notably was our original idea for the hacking minigame, which resembled Deus Ex. That, however, was far too confusing for the player and too large for our scope, so instead we came up with the simplistic puzzle design concept. Also, we began experimenting with different guard archetypes, and we created the dog, which gave the player a guard that they could distract by throwing a piece of meat. And we also came up with cameras, which were similar to the stationary guards, and allowed us to use our shielding mechanic more frequently. In addition to this, we also began minimalizing our focus on secondary objectives, as we realized we just didn't have enough time in our scope to really put in the amount of time needed to make the secondary objectives what we originally wanted. And we also created extra socialites with new abilities such as replenishing the Supervision ability.
Looking back on all this, there are a couple things we have learned and will take away from this experience. Getting started early helps with eliminating bugs quicker, since different code written by different people might conflict. Sometimes a bug may arise that is in your code you've written, which you may fix on your own time, but may leave someone else unable to do anything at all until they go in and fix it themselves, possibly. We learned to organize prefabs in code better in case we need to expand upon things in later development. If things changed later, as we found, sometimes a messy prefab or code may take the change longer to implement. Lastly, we learned a lot of new methods on how to do things, such as creating state machines through inheritance, implementing layered raycasts, UI design, and working effectively as a design team, each sharing the same roles. We certainly enjoyed making this game, and we hope you enjoyed the insight into making of Subversion. Thank you.